In 1961, the eyes of the entire world are fixed on a single courtroom in Jerusalem. Behind bulletproof glass sits an unremarkable man wearing glasses, a grey suit and an almost expressionless face. That man is Adolf Eichmann. He was one of the key organizers of the Holocaust, the man who coordinated deportations, planned transport and helped send millions of Jews to the extermination camps. Yet, when the cameras turned toward him, Eichmann does not resemble the image of a monster that many had expected. No fanatical dictator, no brutal soldier. Instead, there sits a thin man with glasses, ordinary, almost boring. And that is exactly what makes this trial so disturbing for many people. How can someone who appears so ordinary have been part of one of the worst crimes in human history? How does such evil emerge in the first place? And can a person be guilty even if they claim they were just following orders? The Eichmann trial quickly becomes more than just a court proceeding. For the first time, millions of people around the world hear direct testimonies from Holocaust survivors on television. People speak about deportations, families being torn apart, the camps, and the systematic murder carried out by the Nazis. For many viewers, this is the moment when the true scale of the Holocaust becomes real and tangible. Israel wants this trial not only to convict Eichmann, the state also wants to make the stories of the victims visible and force the world to look. And in the middle of this historic moment, a woman appears who will shape the trial forever. That woman is Hannah Arendt, a Jewish intellectual who herself had to flee from the Nazis. A thinker who spent her life examining power, violence and totalitarian systems. Sent by The New Yorker, she travels to Jerusalem to report on the trial. But what she observes there shocks not only the public, it also changed the course of 20th century political philosophy. Because Arendt does not see Eichmann as the demonic monster many want him to be. She sees a bureaucrat, a man hiding behind rules, orders and administrative procedures. Someone acting not out of blind hatred, but out of faithlessness, conformity and obedience. From this observation, she develops her most famous and most controversial concept, the banality of evil. The idea that unimaginable crimes are not committed only by fanatical sadists, but also by completely ordinary people who stop thinking morally for themselves. This thesis sparks outrage around the world. Many accuse Arendt of downplaying Eichmann's crimes. Others see her ideas as one of the most important warnings of the modern age. And that is precisely why the Eichmann trials remain so relevant today. It is not only about the past, it is about the question of how people function within systems, how bureaucracy can obscure responsibility, and how dangerous it becomes when people stop reflecting on their own actions. In this video, I will show how Adolf Eichmann ended up in Jerusalem, why this trial shocked the world, and why Hannah Arendt's observations remain among the most controversial ideas in modern history. Hannah Arendt was one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century. She was born in Germany in 1906 and grew up in a Jewish family. From an early age, she was deeply interested in philosophy. When the Nazis came to power in Germany, Arendt was persecuted because of her Jewish background. In 1933, she first fled to Paris and later, after the German invasion of France, to the United States. There she began writing her most important works and developed into a major political theorist. Hannah Arendt became especially well known for her analysis of totalitarianism, power and responsibility. She gained worldwide attention through her reports on the trial of Nazi war criminal Adolf Eichmann in Jerusalem. During this time, she coined the famous phrase, the banality of evil. By this, Arendt meant that great evil is not committed only by fanatical monsters, but also by ordinary people who blindly follow orders and fail to think for themselves. What made Hannah Arendt so remarkable was her independent thinking. She asked uncomfortable questions, often challenged public opinion, and urged people to take responsibility for their own actions. Her ideas about freedom, democracy, and moral responsibility remain highly relevant today and continue to influence politics, philosophy, and society around the world. Adolf Eichmann was born in Germany in 1906. In his youth, he was not considered particularly successful. He dropped out of school and initially worked various jobs. In the early 1930s, he joined the Nazi party NSDAP and shortly afterwards the SS. It was there that his career within the Nazi regime began. Over time, Eichmann became a specialist in the Nazi so-called Jewish policy. At first, this mainly involved forcing Jewish people to immigrate from Germany. But with the outbreak of the Second World War, the regime policies became increasingly radical. Expulsion turned into systematic extermination. Eichmann worked on the Reich Main Security Office on the SS central authorities. There he organized the deportation of Jewish people from across Europe. His task was to plan transport, provide trains, and ensure that people were removed from their homes, cities, and countries to send to ghettos and extermination camps. Millions of people were deported through the system. Eichmann became particularly notorious for his involvement in the Wannsee Conference in January 1942. In the villa on Berlin's Wannsee Lake, high-ranking representatives of the Nazi regime met to coordinate the so-called final solution to the Jewish question, the systematic murder of European Jews. Eichmann was not the most important politician in the room, but he played a central organizational role. He kept the minutes and later implemented many of the decisions in practice. What was especially disturbing about Eichmann was that he often did not appear to be a fanatical speaker or brutal soldier. Many later described him as bureaucratic, cold, and matter of fact. For many historians, this made him a symbol of how an administrative apparatus could organize mass murder. After the war, Eichmann repeatedly claimed that he had only followed orders. But documents and witness testimonies showed that he was far more than a simple subordinate. When Germany lost the war in 1945 and the Nazi regime collapsed, many leading Nazis attempted to flee. Eichmann also went into hiding at first. Using false papers, he escaped to Argentina. There, he lived under the name Ricardo Clement and appeared to lead a normal life. For many years, he remained undiscovered. But the Israeli intelligence service, the Mossad, continued searching for former Nazi criminals. By the late 1950s, evidence increasingly suggested that Eichmann was living in Argentina. In 1960, the Mossad launched a secret operation. Agents observed Eichmann for weeks and eventually abducted him while he was returning home from work near Buenos Aires. He was secretly taken out of the country and flown to Israel. The news made headlines worldwide. For the first time, one of the key organizers of the Holocaust would stand trial publicly before the world. The trial began in 1961 in Jerusalem and was followed internationally. Television stations reported on it daily, and newspapers around the world published details from the courtroom. The focus was not only on Eichmann's actions, but also on the testimonies of the survivors. For many people, it was the first time they heard detailed witness accounts about deportations, ghettos, concentration and extermination camps. The trial therefore became a historic moment. Eichmann himself showed little remorse during the proceedings. Time and again, he claimed that he had merely followed orders and bore no personal responsibility. The court, however, saw things differently. Numerous documents proved his central role in organizing the deportations and therefore in the deaths of millions of people. In 1961, Eichmann was ultimately found guilty of crimes against humanity, war crimes and crimes against the Jewish people. A year later, the death sentence was carried out. It remains the only civilian execution in the history of Israel. To this day, Adolf Eichmann is regarded as a symbol of how bureaucracy and obedience within a dictatorial system could become tools of enormous crimes. His trial in Jerusalem also shaped global remembrance of the Holocaust and made many people aware for the first time of the full scale of Nazi atrocities. When we hear stories like these, it is difficult for us to believe that seemingly ordinary people are capable of terrible and cruel acts. Yet, this is precisely the danger Hannah Arendt warned us about. We want to believe that evil exists only within evil people, but what the Eichmann trial shows us is that every human being possessed the potential for violence, sadism and cruelty. The Canadian psychologist Jordan B. Peterson once said in one of his lectures about evil in the Nazi era, "Imagine yourself as guard at Auschwitz." The point was not to trivialize Nazi crimes, but rather to confront one's own dark side through the power of imagination. His argument was that the person cannot truly respect themselves until they understand what kind of monster they themselves are capable of becoming. Jordan Peterson meant that those who refuse to confront their own dark side develop the potential for naivety and therefore become easily manipulated. Paradoxically, he taught that the very people who avoid examining their own capacity for evil are the ones most likely to unleash it uncontrollably. This is not only about committing evil acts oneself, but also about failing to prevent others from doing evil. The Nazi era demonstrated that the Holocaust was not only made possible by Nazi criminals, but also by ordinary German citizens who watched as Jews were deported. Also, there were always exceptions, people who risked their own lives to help Jewish individuals. The majority of the population was unwilling to intervene. The Nazi era illustrated that not only perpetrators, but also ordinary people in their daily lives allowed these crimes to happen. When many people are involved in a crime at the same time, the moral responsibility of the individual often weakens. Instead of following one's own moral judgment, people adapt their behavior to the group, even when it contradicts their personal beliefs. In psychology, this phenomenon is known as the bystander effect. The so-called bystander effect describes a social psychological phenomenon in which people are less likely to help in emergency situations when many others are present. The term originated in psychology and became especially well known after the murder case of Kitty Genovese. Her case is considered one of the most famous examples of the bystander effect. Kitty Genovese was a 20-year-old woman who in 1964 was attacked on her way home outside their apartment building in New York. The attacker pursued and severely injured her. The case became famous primarily because reports claimed that 38 neighbors had allegedly witnessed the attack without intervening or calling the police. These reports sparked worldwide discussion about indifference in society and led to extensive psychological research into group behavior. Researchers found that responsibility within groups is often diffused. Each person assumes that someone else will intervene or seek help. As a result, the likelihood that anyone takes action decreases. In addition, people frequently look to the behavior for others for guidance. If no one reacts, the situation is often perceived as less serious. This behavior is also referred to as diffusion of responsibility. Later investigations showed that the original portrayal had been partly exaggerated. Many witnesses could not fully see what was happening or did not initially understand how serious the situation was. Some people did in fact call the police or attempt to help. Nevertheless, the bystander effect can still be observed today, for example during accidents or public assaults, when many people simply watch or film instead of helping directly. At the same time, there are also counterexamples in which individuals consciously take responsibility. One recent case occurred in 2025 at Bondi Beach in Sydney. During an armed attack, a passerby named Ahmed Al-Ahmed intervened, disarmed an attacker and potentially prevented further victims. The media later described him as a hero because he did not remain passive despite the danger. The case clearly shows that also the bystander effect occurs frequently. People are capable of overcoming it when they take responsibility and act decisively. The bystander effect illustrates that people may reduce their sense of responsibility when they are part of a group. However, it is not impossible to still act in a morally right way. In the end, the disturbing realization of the banality of evil remains. It does not require monsters, but ordinary people. Very often, it is completely ordinary individuals functioning within ordinary structures, following instructions, not thinking critically, not objecting thereby and making terrible things possible. What is truly frightening is not spectacular evil, but the ordinary, the unreflective, the silent participation. Hannah Arendt showed how quickly individual morality can disappear when thinking is replaced by obedience and responsibility dissolved within the crowd. And this is precisely where the real warning lies. Evil does not begin only with great crimes, but in small moments of looking away, remaining silent and saying I was only doing my job. The moral lesson is both clear and uncomfortable. Every person bears responsibility not only for what they do, but also for what they fail to do. Civil courage does not begin with heroic acts, but with everyday resistance, questioning, speaking up, refusing to simply go along with others. Because the most dangerous form of evil is not the radical evil that is immediately recognized, but the banal evil that disguises itself as normality. What we can learn from this is that every person carries a certain responsibility in everyday life, both for themselves and for others. Those who possess the courage to confront their own capacity for evil develop the strength to resist it. If monsters commit evil, then normal people are innocent. But if ordinary people are capable of evil, then it concerns all of us.